At Diane's birthday dinner, everything seemed normal on the surface, the usual polite smiles, clinking of silverware, and shallow conversation. Julian, exhausted after returning from a grueling wildlife assignment, had mustered the strength to attend only for his wife Haley's sake. But something felt off from the moment he stepped into his in-laws' colonial-style home. That uneasy knot in his stomach tightened when Diane cornered him in the kitchen, offering him a glass of sangria with an overly bright smile. "Special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law," she said, her tone too cheerful, her eyes darting nervously around the room. As she handed him the glass, Julian noticed a faint, oily shimmer on the surface of the drink, something that didn't belong. His heart pounded as he forced a smile, masking the chill creeping up his spine. Instinct kicked in. Calmly and without drawing attention, he offered to help carry the drinks back to the table. As he walked, he subtly switched glasses, placing the tampered one in front of Gerald, his cold, condescending father-in-law who had never respected him or his work. Gerald, distracted and scrolling on his phone, took the glass without a second thought and drank. Julian sat down, sipping water instead of wine, silently counting the minutes. His mind raced. Had he imagined it? Was he overreacting? But then, 45 minutes later, the truth revealed itself in all its ugliness. Gerald's face turned pale. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead. Without a word, he pushed back his chair and rushed to the bathroom. The sounds that followed, retching, coughing, chaos, filled the house. Across the table, Diane's face went ghostly white. Her eyes met Julian's, and in that moment, he knew two things with chilling certainty: she had tried to drug him, and she now realized her plan had failed. Julian didn't say a word. He didn't accuse her, didn't make a scene. He simply took a bite of his chocolate cake, the taste bitter in his mouth, while inside him something shifted, a cold, deliberate anger rising. He had been targeted, but he wasn't going to retaliate with rage. He would respond with precision. And Diane had just made the biggest mistake of her life. In the aftermath of that haunting family dinner, Julian found himself unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Diane's carefully practiced smile, heard her falsely sweet voice offering him that poisoned drink. The image of Gerald pale and vomiting echoed in his memory, but it wasn't guilt he felt, it was a chilling clarity. He knew, with certainty now, that his mother-in-law had tried to drug him, maybe even harm him more severely. And yet, rather than exploding in anger or confronting her in front of the family, Julian did what he'd always done best: he observed, calculated, and planned. He kept the glass Diane had meant for him, wrapping it in a towel and sealing it in a box. He wasn't sure what he would find, but he knew he needed something more than intuition to go on. That Monday morning, he visited Jason, a former client who now worked as a lead technician in a toxicology lab. Jason raised an eyebrow at the request. "Personal or professional?" he asked, examining the sealed glass. "Family matter," Julian replied quietly, his tone betraying nothing of the storm inside him. The wait was agonizing. For 3 days, Julian tried to focus on editing the wildlife photos from Montana, but his mind kept drifting. What if it was nothing? What if Diane was just being strange, as always? But deep down, he knew it wasn't just paranoia. When Jason finally called back, his voice was firm. "Julian, there were benzodiazepines in that drink. Not a fatal dose, but enough to knock someone out cold. Memory loss, confusion, heavy sedation, it would have hit hard and fast." Julian thanked him and asked for a full written report. He didn't flinch. Instead, he felt something settle inside him, like pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together. He didn't tell Haley about the results, yet. This wasn't just about what happened that night. He needed to understand why. And more importantly, he needed to uncover what else Diane was hiding. Over the following 2 weeks, Julian transformed into an investigator. Late at night, while Haley slept, he scoured public records and quietly made calls to connections in town. What he found shocked him, though in hindsight, perhaps it shouldn't have. Diane had been prescribed Xanax not by one doctor, but by 3, using different clinics across counties. Her pharmacy records were a mess of overlapping medications. Rumors surfaced: odd behavior at a neighbor's wine tasting, disappearing jewelry at the country club, hushed whispers of episodes that her family dismissed or covered up. Julian documented it all, every prescription, every anecdote, every thread of Diane's carefully constructed facade unraveling. He wasn't just building a case. He was building a story. One the whole family would soon have to face. Then, fate handed him a perfect opening. Haley approached him with a surprised smile. "My mom asked if you could take some portraits for her new online profile. She specifically asked for you." Julian raised his eyebrows but didn't hesitate. "Of course," he said. He arrived at Diane and Gerald's house that Saturday with his camera bag slung over one shoulder and a sealed envelope in the other. Diane greeted him alone, her appearance flawless, her energy overly bright. "Gerald's at the office," she said, ushering him in. Julian didn't waste time. Before she could even sit down, he handed her the envelope. "I thought you might want to see this before we begin." She opened it, hands already trembling. Inside were the toxicology results, copies of her overlapping prescriptions, and a brief summary of incidents tied to her name. For a moment, Diane said nothing. Her face was unreadable, caught between panic and indignation. "This is absurd," she whispered at last, voice brittle. "I would never." Julian cut her off. "We both know what you did. What I don't know is why." Her mask slipped then. Her face twisted into something harder, colder. "Because you're not good enough for my daughter," she hissed. "You never were. A man should provide stability, not pictures. And drugging your daughter's husband? That's your idea of protecting her? It wasn't going to hurt you," she snapped. "Just make you miss your little gallery show. Show Haley you're unreliable. That's all." Julian stared at her, unmoving. Her words chilled him more than the winter wind in Montana ever could. This wasn't a moment of emotional desperation, it was premeditated sabotage. Diane wasn't trying to scare him. She was trying to dismantle his life. But she had made one critical mistake. She underestimated him. Julian stepped out of Diane's house with a mechanical sort of calm, like a man walking away from a burning building he could no longer save. The door clicked shut behind him, and with it, something inside him also closed. His hands trembled slightly as he slid them into his coat pockets, but his expression remained blank, stoic, detached. He didn't want the neighbors to see. He didn't want anyone to know what he had just heard, what he had just confirmed. The street was quiet, leaves rustling in a faint breeze, but Julian's mind was roaring. Diane had admitted it, without even trying to hide it. She had looked him in the eye and spoken about her control over Haley's life with a terrifying confidence. Her words echoed in his head: "You're a phase she'll forget." No remorse. No guilt. Only calculation. It made his stomach twist, not just in fear, but in something darker, rage. But beneath that fury was a cold, paralyzing dread. He knew people like Diane didn't make idle threats. She was capable of more than manipulation, she was capable of silence, of disappearance. His. Haley's. Anyone's. The evidence he had gathered suddenly felt both powerful and dangerous, like holding a live wire. If he used it carelessly, he could destroy everything. If he did nothing, he might lose Haley forever, or worse. Back in his studio, he poured himself a drink with shaking hands, but didn't touch it. The glass sat untouched for hours as he stared at the documents, the hidden camera footage, the timeline he had mapped out across a whiteboard. He had started this thinking he could uncover the truth and then walk away. But now, he realized this was a war. Diane wasn't just trying to protect her daughter, she was trying to erase him. He spent the next several days in a strange state of quiet urgency. His routines stayed the same, waking up early, shooting photographs, checking in with Haley, but his mind was somewhere else, always calculating. He created backups of his evidence, encrypted them, sent copies to out-of-state friends under fake names. He started recording phone calls. Keeping logs. Watching the house from a distance, just in case Diane noticed something he missed. And then came the moment that shattered his denial. One evening, as Haley leaned against his shoulder, half asleep on the couch, she murmured, "I've been feeling weird lately. Like, sometimes I just black out. I don't remember falling asleep, but then I wake up in my room." Her voice was soft, uncertain, like she didn't fully believe herself. "It's probably nothing," she added quickly. Julian didn't speak. He couldn't. Every muscle in his body locked up. It wasn't nothing. It was Diane. And now he knew, time was running out. Julian couldn't sleep. The weight of everything he had uncovered pressed down on him like a storm cloud that refused to break. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Haley, smiling, laughing, then suddenly distant, confused, hollow. It was like watching someone slowly vanish from the inside out. He'd been trying to rationalize it for weeks, telling himself maybe she was just tired, maybe she needed space, but now he knew better. The fragmented memories, the shift in her personality, the moments where she didn't recognize her own words, these weren't random. Diane was behind it. And if he didn't act soon, he might lose Haley for good. That realization settled in his chest like ice. He wasn't just worried anymore, he was terrified. Determined to fight back, Julian dove headfirst into every shred of evidence he'd gathered: old messages, suspicious financial transactions, voice recordings, and background checks on Diane's closest allies. He pinned papers across the walls of his apartment like a detective from a crime drama, red string connecting names and timelines, trying to build a picture of Diane's true intentions. The more he uncovered, the more sinister the pattern became. Diane was methodical. Precise. Everything about her screamed manipulation, not just of Haley, but of everyone in her orbit. Julian knew he couldn't do this alone anymore. He contacted Lena, a seasoned investigative journalist he once worked with on an ethics committee case. If anyone could help him uncover the truth and make it public, it was her. They met in a quiet corner booth of a rundown cafe, one Julian picked specifically for its anonymity. As the rain pattered softly against the windows, he laid it all out for her, his fears, his findings, and the gut-wrenching feeling that he was already too late. Lena listened in silence, her brows furrowing with every detail. When he finished, she leaned back slowly, her expression grim. "Julian," she said, her voice low and certain, "you're not crazy. This woman, she's dangerous." For the first time in weeks, Julian felt something close to hope. Lena agreed to dig into Diane's past, to use her contacts and resources to find the cracks in Diane's carefully constructed facade. But Julian knew that while exposure might stop Diane eventually, Haley needed help now. And there was no guarantee she'd believe him, not with how deep Diane's influence seemed to run. So he tried something else. That night, he sat down at his desk, took a deep breath, and began to write. The letter to Haley came slowly at first, hesitant words on a blank page, but soon poured out of him in a flood of emotion. He didn't try to present evidence or persuade her logically. Instead, he wrote from the heart. He reminded her of who she was before Diane entered her life. He described how he missed the way her eyes used to light up when she talked about her dreams. He told her he wasn't trying to control her, he was trying to reach her. Trying to remind her that she had always known how to think and feel for herself. When he finished, Julian folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope with no name, and held it for a long moment. His fingers trembled as he sealed it. It felt like he was handing over his heart. The next day, during a casual lunch they had arranged, Diane believed Julian was harmless. After all, he waited for the right moment. As Haley excused herself to use the restroom, he gently placed the envelope into the side pocket of her purse. When she returned, everything looked normal again. She smiled at him, though her eyes looked a little distant, and as they stood to leave, he hugged her tightly. "Just trust what you feel," he whispered near her ear, his voice cracking slightly. "Not what they tell you." He watched her walk away, unsure of what would happen next. Maybe she'd read the letter and remember who she was. Maybe she'd tear it up without a second thought. But either way, Julian had made his move. And no matter what came next, he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The days that followed after Julian handed Haley the letter were some of the longest he had ever endured. Time felt distorted, as though each minute stretched into hours. He couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't sleep at night, and every interaction felt shallow and muted, like he was underwater, waiting for something to pull him out. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on his chest. Had she read it? Did she believe him? Or had she dismissed it entirely, filing it away in the same place she kept all his past concerns, somewhere safe, where she wouldn't have to confront them? Julian found himself constantly checking his phone, scanning every notification with a mixture of hope and dread. Each silence felt louder than the last. He was torn between giving her space and the overwhelming desire to know what she was thinking. Did she finally see it? The subtle cruelty in Diane's kindness, the cracks in Gerald's carefully curated charm? Or was she still trapped in the illusion they had built around her since childhood? By the time Sunday arrived, Julian's nerves were frayed. He had considered not going to Diane's dinner, avoiding the suffocating atmosphere and cold hostility, but he knew he couldn't afford to. Not now. If Haley had read the letter, this dinner might be the first time she'd be seeing her family with new eyes. He had to be there, not to interfere, but to bear witness, to offer silent support if her world began to shift. As he pulled up to Diane's house, the familiar facade of domestic tranquility felt more oppressive than ever. The house, always so meticulously presented, now felt like a stage set, and Julian was painfully aware of the performance about to unfold. Diane greeted him at the door with her usual saccharine smile, but there was an edge to her warmth that made Julian's skin crawl. Gerald offered a curt nod, his eyes scanning Julian like he was something unpleasant tracked in from outside. The pretense of civility was thin, so thin it could tear at any moment. During dinner, the tension simmered just beneath the surface. Julian sat quietly, observing everything. Diane's constant chatter, her overly sweet compliments laced with passive aggression. Gerald's smug, dismissive remarks aimed like darts at Julian's career choices and opinions. And Haley was unusually quiet. She pushed her food around her plate, her eyes flicking up occasionally, then quickly dropping. She didn't laugh at Diane's stories like she usually did. She didn't meet Gerald's gaze with the same effortless ease. There was something different about her tonight. Julian's heart pounded every time her eyes drifted to him. He wanted so badly to ask her, "Did you read it? Do you believe me now?" But he couldn't. Not here. Instead, he watched her, and he saw it: confusion, discomfort, a flicker of realization. It wasn't much, but it was something. He clung to it like a lifeline. As the dinner dragged on, Julian found it harder to keep his emotions in check. Every false word from Diane felt like a slap. Every time Gerald spoke over Haley or subtly corrected her, Julian had to clench his fists to stay seated. But he didn't act out. He couldn't afford to. He was walking a delicate line, and if he pushed too hard, she might retreat again into the safety of denial. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the meal ended. Diane offered a final sugary goodbye, and Julian stepped outside into the cool night air, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in his ears. Then, his phone buzzed. It was from Haley. Just a few simple words, but they hit him like a tidal wave. "I read it. We'll talk when I get home." Julian stared at the message, his eyes blurring with unexpected tears. Relief, fear, hope, they all collided in his chest. She read it. And she wanted to talk. That meant she wasn't ignoring it, wasn't pretending everything was fine. It was a small step, but to Julian, it was everything. This was the moment the walls began to crack. That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He lay awake in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, heart racing with equal parts anticipation and dread. He had imagined this moment countless times, the moment Haley would finally begin to question everything she had been told, everything she had believed. And yet, now that it was happening, he felt unsteady, unsure of what came next. He knew this wouldn't be a simple conversation. It would be the beginning of a reckoning, years of hidden truths, suppressed memories, and carefully constructed illusions slowly unraveling. When Haley walked into the apartment just after midnight, Julian sat up instantly. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders slumped with the weight of something invisible. She didn't say anything at first. She simply walked past him into the living room and stood by the window, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Julian followed quietly, giving her space, waiting. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "How long have you felt this way?" she asked, not turning around. Julian took a deep breath. "A long time," he admitted. "But I didn't want to push you. I didn't want you to think I was trying to turn you against your family. I saw what they were doing. Especially Diane. And I couldn't stay silent anymore." Haley turned then, her eyes searching his face. There was pain in her expression, but also something else, clarity. "Reading your letter, it felt like someone had turned on a light in a room I didn't even know I was sitting in. Everything started to look different. The way she talks to me. The way she makes me feel like I owe her everything, even when I've done nothing wrong." Julian nodded slowly. "That's how they keep control. By making you doubt yourself." Haley sat down, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "I feel like my whole life has been scripted. Like I've just been playing the part they wanted me to play." Julian knelt beside her, gently taking her hands away from her face. "That's not your fault," he said softly. "But you're not alone now. You don't have to keep pretending." For the first time in what felt like forever, Haley let herself cry. Not silent, restrained tears, but real, shaking sobs that racked her body. And Julian held her, steady and quiet, as the truth finally began to break free. In the days that followed, something shifted between them, something quiet but unmistakable. There was no dramatic confrontation with Diane, no grand declarations or final goodbye. Not yet. But there was space for Haley to think, to breathe, to question. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of her own thoughts. She began to notice the small things, the way Diane's praise always came with conditions, how guilt was used like currency in their conversations, how love was given only when earned. And beside her, always steady, was Julian, patient, never pressing, simply there. They spent more time talking now, walking late at night through quiet streets, sharing memories, filling in the blanks of the past. Haley wasn't healed yet. The road ahead was uncertain, and there were still days when the doubt crept in, when she questioned everything all over again. But now, she had a choice. She had her voice. And as she stood on the balcony one morning, watching the sun rise over the city, she realized something. The version of herself that had always lived in the shadow of others was slowly fading. In her place stood someone braver, someone growing stronger with every truth faced, every boundary drawn. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be real. And for the first time, that was enough.